Friends, when we were last in school, we were traveling to so many different places, right? We were in China, we went to Malaysia, we went to Uganda, Italy, Spain, France, Australia, Mexico, Ecuador. We went to so many different places all over the world, right? Yeah. Wouldn't it be cool if we could all just fly to those different places and live there for a little bit? That would be pretty cool, right? But sometimes the best place we have to live is at home, right where we are. Well, let's see what happens when two of our birdie friends, Mr. and Mrs. Bird, find the best nest. Mr. Bird was happy. He had to sing. This was Mr. Bird's song. I love my house. I love my nest. In all the world, my nest is best. Then Mrs. Bird came out of the house. It's not the best nest, she said. I'm tired of this old place, said Mrs. Bird. I hate it. Let's look for a new place right now. So they left the old place to look for a new one. This place looks nice, said Mr. Bird. Let's move in here. Where are they moving? Yeah, into the tree. But somebody else had already moved in. Can't live there. So they looked at another house. This one looks nice, said Mr. Bird, and there's nobody in it. Friends, who do you think, or what do you think, is going to be living in this boot soon? Yeah, your foot? Maybe. You're wrong, said Mrs. Bird. This house belongs to a foot. Oh, no. So they went on looking. Oh, I like this one, said Mr. Bird. It has a pretty red flag on the roof. I've always wanted a house with a flag, said Mrs. Bird. Maybe this place will be all right. Do you know what goes inside this house? Let's find out. But it was not right at all. I guess I made a mistake, said Mr. Bird, as the mailman delivered the mail. You make too many mistakes, said Mrs. Bird. I'm going to pick the next house. And here it is. Right here. Not a bad-looking house. They flew in. They looked around. Isn't it too big? Asked Mr. Bird. I like this big place, said Mrs. Bird. This is the place to build our new nest. Oh, do you see that big bell? What do you think is going to happen with that bell? Let's find out. They went right to work. They needed many things to build their nest. First, they got some hay. They got some soda straws and broom straws. They even got some sweater string. They got some stocking string and mattress stuffing. They got some horsehair. They got some man hair. And soon they had all the hay, all the straw, all the string, all the stuffing, all the horsehair, and all the man hair they could carry. And they took it back to build their nest. Mr. and Mrs. Bird worked very hard. It took them the rest of the morning to finish their nest. This nest really is the best, said Mrs. Bird. I want to stay here forever. Mr. Bird was happy too. He flew to the top of his house and he sang his song again. I love our house. I love our nest. In all the world, our nest is best. He was so busy singing, he didn't even see Mr. Parker coming. Every day at 12 o'clock, Mr. Parker came to the church. Mr. Parker came to pull the rope. The rope went up. The bird's new nest. Oh no! The rope rang, rang, rang the bell right under Mrs. Bird's nest. Oh no, poor Mrs. Bird! Mrs. Bird got out of there as fast as she could. Bong, 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 bong. When Mr. Bird came in, all he could see was a mess of hay and string and stuffing and horsehair and manhair and straws. Where was Mrs. Bird? Do you see Mrs. Bird anywhere? This is Mr. Bird, but where's Mrs. Bird? I don't know. I will look for her until I find her, said Mr. Bird, and he looked high. And he looked low. He looked everywhere for Mrs. Bird. He looked down into a chimney, but Mrs. Bird was not there. He looked down into a water barrel, but Mrs. Bird wasn't there. Wherever could she be? Then he saw a big, fat cat. There was a big, fat smile on the fat cat's face. There were some pretty brown feathers near the cat's mouth. Mr. Bird began to cry. Oh dear, he cried. This big fat cat has eaten Mrs. Bird. Mr. Bird flew off. I'll never see Mrs. Bird again, he cried. It was getting dark. It began to rain. It rained harder and harder and harder, and Mr. Bird could not see where he was going. Crash! Mr. Bird bumped into something. What did he bump into? It was his old house. That old house Mrs. Bird had hated. I'll go inside, said Mr. Bird. I'll rest here until the rain stops. Mr. Bird went in, and there was Mrs. Bird sitting there, singing, I love my house, I love my nest, in all the world this nest is best. They love their old nest. You? Here? Gasped Mr. Bird. I thought you hated this old nest. Mrs. Bird smiled. I used to hate it, she said, but a mother bird can change her mind. You see, there's no nest like an old nest for a brand new bird. They're gonna have a baby bird. What color is the baby bird's egg? Yeah, it's blue. And when the egg popped open, the new bird thought so too. The end. Wow, that was a pretty adventurous story, right? All that flying and trying new homes. Yeah. Going someplace new is really, really fun and exciting. But sometimes north, south, east, west, home is always best. Well, friends, that's all the time we have right now. You have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you later. Bye-bye.